You're listening to the Today's Family Lawyer podcast, the leading source of daily news and insight for family law practitioners in England and Wales. Sign up to our free weekly newsletter at todaysfamilylawyer.co.uk and subscribe to hear all the latest news and views from across the family law sector. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Hello, welcome along to the latest Today's Family Lawyer podcast. Today we are going to be talking about divorce coaching. What is a divorce coach? How do they work? What do they do, more importantly? I think it's fair to say there are lots of questions that our listeners will have. Hopefully I'll be able to articulate a few of them. Our guests today are Sally Jackson. Sally is the owner of Sally Jackson Coaching, a divorce coaching business, and Julia Moreno. Julia is a family lawyer and a divorce coach as well. So both are well placed really to share some insight into the discussion. Thank you both very much indeed for joining the podcast.
You're welcome.
Thank you, David.
It's customary with the podcast to do a short introduction to each of you. I'd really like you to tell us a little bit about yourselves and perhaps how you got into coaching in the first place. Sally, can I come to you first, please?
Absolutely. So I'm Sally Jackson and I'm a certified professional divorce coach. Julia and I both trained with the Divorce Coaching Academy. I'm based in Exmouth in Devon. I work online with my clients all over the UK. I have expertise in nursing, grief support, previous roles as a health coach, menopause nurse specialist, and lecturer in clinical communication at the University of Cambridge. And that equips me to provide holistic and multifaceted support to my clients. My mission is to help my clients to minimize the damage of divorce to all parties, and specifically to show midlife women how they can grow through divorce, come out stronger and ready to build a life that they really love. I work mainly with midlife women and couples who are uncertain whether or not to divorce.
I think one of the really interesting things I've found in the discussions that I've had with yourself and other divorce coaches is the level of qualification that you bring to the table. And that's a really important part of the discussion today, that this isn't a flash in the pan. You know, we're not kind of just setting up as a divorce coach and sort of pretending, perhaps in inverted commas. There's a huge amount of research and information that goes into the qualification. Julia, perhaps you might tell us a bit about yourself.
So as Sally, I'm a certified professional divorce coach. I'm based in London. And I also work as a family law solicitor at Keystone Law. I have 20 years of experience working with individuals and families. You asked what the reason why I decided to go into divorce coaching, and there are several reasons. But I would say that the main one is that having worked as a family lawyer for many years, and also from my personal experience, I realized that emotions play a fundamental role in how you navigate the divorce process and in the final outcome. Then my main mission when working as a divorce coach and also as a lawyer is to support as many families as possible to have a better and a kinder experience of separation and divorce if their relationship cannot be safe. With my guidance and with my support, I help clients to make informed choices so that they don't have regrets, so that they can achieve the best outcomes and minimize the emotional and the financial impact that the separation and divorce can have, and then plan their next chapter of their life.
Both comprehensive and really informative introductions. Thank you so much. I wanted to start the discussion perhaps by going back to basics a touch, really. And I wanted you both to share what your thoughts are around what a divorce coach is and where they fit into the divorce proceedings?
Those who have experienced a divorce know that divorce goes beyond legal matters. And a divorce coach helps you manage the breakdown of the relationship. It can involve emotional, practical, financial, and even legal guidance and support. And there are various types of divorce coaches depending on their training, their knowledge, or their background. I personally, due to my training, can help through every step of the separation and divorce journey, and even before. But given my background as a family lawyer, where I provide the most value is during the planning stage and throughout the legal process. And it's also important for me as a professional to put the needs of the client and their family at the center of the process. Depending on their specialty, divorce coaches can support clients before, during, and after the divorce process. Although not all the clients consult you at the very beginning, either due to the lack of knowledge or because they believe they don't need help and they think that they can handle it themselves until they feel stuck or realize that they made a mistake, and then they come to you.
I think it's a very complex time, and the divorce can actually just be the final insult, if you like. A woman at that point in their life may well have experienced a couple of bereavements, may well have teenagers with angst, may have elderly parents, and quite often are also at the point in their life where they're very successful in their role as well, so have a lot of pressure on them in all sorts of directions. And I think a woman in that state quite often may well have lost sight of their own needs. And so suddenly being asked, to state what their needs are, may actually be really, really difficult for them, because they no longer know what they want or indeed who they are. So I find them an absolutely fascinating group of women to work with. And then, of course, on top of that, they're often also experiencing menopause. And with my background in menopause work, I'm very well suited to be able to direct them in the right direction as far as that goes as well. If I think back to our cohort, we had mediators, we had other lawyers, we had someone who was a finance expert, we had someone who was already an expert mediator with domestic violence. So, there are divorce coaches who specialize in domestic violence and high conflict. I personally seem to be attracting quite a lot of high conflict divorces. I went through a very acrimonious divorce myself, and I suspect that that comes out a little bit in the sort of way I talk about divorce, and that perhaps attracts those kind of clients. I think it is key to understand that people bring that wealth of experience into becoming a divorce coach and use that to support their clients in the best way possible.
I want to drill into something that you've both touched on, which is that you have a role before divorce, which I find absolutely fascinating. How is that different from counselling, for example, Sally?
So we both trained in something called couples clarity coaching. When a couple actually, one of them wants to divorce and one of them wants to stay together. And I would say that actually when I talk to lawyers, this is actually one of the bits of what I offer that they're most excited about. Because when they have a client who comes to them and says, I don't know whether to divorce or not, there's not much they can offer them. But actually working with us with couples clarity coaching can be really beneficial. And that's not counselling. It is actually helping the clients, if you like, with discerning what path they want to take by actually identifying each of their roles within a relationship. No matter what the split, it may not be 50-50, it may be 98-2%, But there is always two sides, unless domestic abuse is involved, obviously. And so when you can help each party to hear how the other one is actually experiencing the relationship, and to hear what they are seeing as the problems, that can be really helpful in terms of helping that couple to decide what's the best path for them. So if I give you an example, that's probably the best way I could illustrate this. I worked with a couple where the wife was absolutely furious because the husband had had an affair. And in the session, the individuals looked at what they each had contributed to the breakdown of the relationship. Now, it was acknowledged right from the start by the wife that she knew that the husband relied very much on intimacy as his kind of primary love language. That was his way of how he got connection. And she acknowledged that she had been really struggling because of the menopause, that they hadn't had sex for 2 years, which actually is incredibly common in midlife relationships. She felt ashamed, she felt angry, she was extremely angry with him. But by him explaining that actually he was bitterly regretting what he'd done, but that he was just searching for that connection. And it had got so bad that even if he went to give her a cuddle, she would break out in a sweat. So she would push him away, even in that kind of situation. So literally, he had no intimacy, no connection at all. And they began to understand how both of them had a part to play. She had not talked really about how she felt that her body was completely out of control. She'd kind of accepted that this was what she was going to have to do. She'd gone to the NHS for care, but she'd not been successful in getting the right care. They hadn't really talked about what was happening. And alongside this, they were a typical midlife family. They had a lot of teenage angst. They had very busy jobs. And so they weren't actually allowing themselves any time either to get to what was going on. And over the course of the sessions, she became less angry and began to see how he'd been feeling, and the fact that she wanted to access more support, and he began to understand that more. She began to understand that they hadn't been talking. And I think there is a high chance that that couple will actually stay together. That we've done 4 sessions and we would normally do 5. So they've gone away now to do this. She's gone to get private menopause care. They're doing a lot of talking, and then they're going to come back and make a decision. I think that the key thing for me is with couples clarity coaching, I think when a couple choose to divorce in that way, having heard much more about each other's perspectives, they're so much more likely to divorce with dignity. And when they commit to actually staying together, they will probably do that alongside actually having some couples therapy, which would be counselling, and which would they've actually got the bones of what they want to work on then, because they've actually identified what the issues are.
I think it's a really interesting example, and as you say, very relevant to a lot of people, a lot of cases. Julie, how does that work then in terms of how you work with the lawyer? Perhaps the lawyer's been approached by a couple quite similar to this. Where do you fit in? How do you start that journey with them?
Obviously, every lawyer works in a different way. I will speak from my personal way of working. When a client comes to see me as a lawyer, because I have my background as a coach, one of my first questions, whether they come directly to me as a coach or as a lawyer, my first question is, are you sure? Are you sure that this is the step that you want to take? You want to separate? Do you want to divorce? If I see any doubt, then I give them time to think. And also, if I can help them as a coach personally, then we will go through, we'll have a few sessions to explore that decision. If they come to me as an individual, I would also invite them to do it as a couple. I train the same as Sally on couples clarity coaching. But it's something you can do as an individual or as a couple. If I'm going to be working for that client as a lawyer, I may refer that client to another coach to help them. Within the profession, you will find family lawyers that when they see that there is some doubt as to whether to proceed with the divorce, that they would make a referral, but you also have some that they don't. Maybe because they don't have the training to spot that person. When you have the experience, there are some red flags that you can notice when someone is at the early stages of the process, if they are showing a lot of anger, or they are depressed, or there is a lot of language of blame. You start thinking, does this person need help to be sure about what they are doing? I've been working as a coach for over 3 years, and in my first year, probably I saw a client, and then they came back after 2 years and said, now I'm ready, and now I want to do it.
I think as the coach, I think one of our biggest responsibilities is grounding the client in reality. This is a really painful process, even when it goes well, even when it's a fairly kind process. It's still very painful. You are uprooting pretty much every bit of your life. I sometimes say to my clients, it is a little bit like putting your life on a blanket, throwing it up in the air and not knowing what bits are actually going to land back on that blanket, what's going to be off it, and you're going to try and get it back on, what's going to be lost completely. It's a huge decision. And I think that grounding in reality, what actually is really involved in this, are you really ready for this, is a big first responsibility of a divorce coach, I think.
Sally, I want to pick up on something that Julia said there, which is around identifying clients that might need that level of support. Is this something that we need to train family lawyers to be able to better identify? I mean, how often are you called into a case, for example?
Most of my clients actually come directly to me. I haven't had many who've come via family lawyers yet. I have had family lawyers who've referred clients to me, but the clients haven't yet got in touch with me. What I will say, though, is I chose the course because of the rigor. I chose it because of the depth that we went into on issues like this. And I do think it's additional training. I don't think it's something that you can get in a lunchtime or whatever. There's a level of depth to understanding family dynamics, to understanding how somebody reacts when they're in fear, flight, freeze modes, and how that might show up. And it's very easy, I think, to think I'm very good at understanding my clients, I'm very good at empathizing. And yes, that's incredibly important, but that is just the start. Is then what you do with that. So, for example, if I identify that something is triggering a client, it's about having the confidence to actually help them to explore, well, what emotion am I actually experiencing, and where is that emotion coming from, what's the root of it? And that is very specific work, I think.
When you go through a relationship breakdown, you are going through a grief cycle. There are different stages that you go through. And if you are at the early stages, which are anger, depression, bargaining, you are not in a position to make sound decisions. You are not acting rationally. So if you go to see a lawyer or any other professional in that state, you won't be able to take action in the manner that you would want to. The legal process is only it's just one piece of the puzzle. There are lots of things involved in a separation and divorce. And working with the divorce coach, not only you can prepare yourself for what is required during the legal process, but also take into consideration everything else. How are you going to communicate your news to if you are the one that made the decision, how you're going to communicate that to your spouse or your partner to minimize the animosity, to minimize the conflict? How are you going to support your children? Then you have other things. You have to think about practicalities. Whilst the process, it can take months, even years. What is going to happen during that period of time? What are going to be the living arrangements? What are going to be the financial arrangements? How are you going to take care of the children? There are lots of things that need to be thought about, and there are things that cannot be dealt by lawyers because our hourly rates are high. And from my experience, having worked, on both sides, as a lawyer and as a coach, what I see is that clients that have worked with a coach have a more dignified process. Mm-hmm. They are more satisfied with the results. They grow through the process. The process is smoother. It costs them less money, and their healing process is much faster. I have worked with professionals, myself as a coach, and with other professionals, being lawyers or financial planners, accountants, and to date, I haven't had any criticism from them or any complaint as to the benefits that I have offered to the client working as a coach. To the contrary, it's been more, they talk more about the benefits because they found it easier to work with a client. Their feedback has been, we're getting clearer and better instructions. We are not, sometimes even myself, when I working as a lawyer, there would be clients that would send me hundreds of emails and lots of documents that didn't make any sense or maybe were irrelevant, but you as a lawyer have to read them and you have to consider them and charge the client for it. But when I'm working with the client as a coach, we think, well, we sit down and, okay, what is what we want to achieve? What is necessary here? Is this information relevant? Let's present it in a way that it would be easily understood and also being clear as to what is the outcome.
There's lots of nodding along there, Sally. You obviously agree.
Yes, I do. I mean, I was actually thinking about a client that I'm working with this week. And her lawyer basically sent her unedited the proposal that her ex had sent. And it just really made me reflect, because this woman is, a best description I can give you is she's in total chaos at the moment. And I'll just give you 2 or 3 examples. So the first thing is she's totally stuck in her divorce story. So she is so angry, so betrayed, so determined to get her own back, that if she was to respond to this proposal at the moment, it would be dire in terms of how she would respond. But also she's incredibly erratic at the moment. So, for example, most evenings she is dealing with the sort of emotional overwhelm by hitting the bottle and drinking, several glasses of wine to kind of numb herself. And she's also incredibly vulnerable to being influenced by other people. So, for example, she actually made a decision to move out of the family home, and she took a job that is she's working 72 hours a week. There have been impacts on her health. At the same time, she signed up to a course that cost £4,000 that she's got no way that she can actually fulfill that course. And this is all because she can't think clearly, she can't make decisions, she can't. And it's that kind of thing that's going on in the background that the lawyer almost certainly wouldn't even be aware of, but that actually means she's not in any fit state to make even quite a simple decision at the moment, let alone to decide her financial future.
I think you've both answered one of my questions, which is whether there are tensions once you're engaged? And I guess it's a case-by-case basis, but Julia, have you ever come across a point in time where you've been engaged as a coach, but there's a tension between you and the lawyer? And what is it around, if there has been?
Well, interesting. In any type of relationship, there can be tensions, whether with personal relationships or whoever you work. So there always can be tensions. I personally, as I mentioned earlier, I haven't had any issues working with other lawyers. But I think what's important is whenever you're working in a team, is to have open communication. And when we're dealing with families, it's also it's crucial that we put the best interest of the client at the forefront. And what I do personally is, if I'm working with other professionals, being family lawyers or accountants or financial planners, is that we talk about the client's needs and how best to support that client. And then it's important to define who is doing what, create a plan of action, and also to set boundaries like you would set them for any other type of relationship. So that's from my personal experience. So far, I've been lucky that there hadn't been any issues.
What about yourself, Sally?
I haven't had any issues either. I've found that every conversation I've had with family lawyers, they have been really keen to learn more about what I do, to hear cases of examples of what I've achieved in terms of the difference that I've made. I think it's just time. I think, when mediation came in, it took a while to get into, becoming kind of accepted. Nowadays, you wouldn't think twice about mediation. In fact, it's even being recommended, isn't it, as being part of the court process in the future. But years ago, mediators weren't part of the deal, and I think it's the same with divorce coaches. I think it will take time. I personally feel that there is a real move towards a team approach to thinking about what are the client's needs and putting those in the center. And I see increasingly a move to having, an IFA, a lawyer, a divorce coach working collaboratively to meet that client's needs to the best of their ability.
One of the questions I wanted to ask you, and Sally, perhaps you might come back to me on this one first, is what impact no-fault divorce has had on your practice? Because I think what is plainly obvious is that there isn't really such a thing as no-fault divorce.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I haven't yet worked with a couple going through no-fault divorce. But what I would say is that when you start to dig into issues such as division of assets and that sort of thing, even when you want to do that in the kindest way possible, it is inevitably triggering, and it will bring out fears, and people need the opportunity to be able to unpack that. When somebody is coming back at you with something, it is because they are not feeling heard. And so it takes a lot of skill in that situation to actually stop, acknowledge what you're hearing, and then to ask them to tell you more about what's behind that, and to not automatically either jump in to try and fix it or jump in because you feel you've got the answer. And I think unless you've got that very specific training, it can be very easy to step into the wanting to fix it role. And the little bit that I am hearing about I have spoken to a few lawyers, and they have said that they do find that that causes a moment of real difficulty, where they know that them providing the answer isn't the right thing to do and immediately gets rebutted, and potentially increases the conflict. But actually, it's their natural, they are solution orientated as lawyers, and actually that's my take on that. And alongside that, I would say, there's huge change in family law generally, particularly around things like the use of language, words like versus. We are trying to move towards a much more collaborative, much more dignified approach to divorce. And so I think it's an exciting time, but I think it's much more challenging than perhaps was initially perceived.
Julia.
Yeah, in terms of the no-fault divorce, I think it brought a couple of things that were positive. One of them is that having the no blame, it helped to reduce the animosity that there had been in many cases prior to the legislation coming in. There were some people that used a divorce petition to just say a lot of bad things about their other spouse, and without giving the opportunity for that couple to process what was happening, which led to the process starting in a negative way. Having said that, now you find that there are clients that they would like to say those things, and they don't find there is a venue for doing it. And if you are working with such a client, the best way is, for example, to speak with a coach or a therapist where they can express all their negative emotions and anything that they may be feeling, so that they have an opportunity to process it. Just because the divorce application may seem that there is no blame and it's amicable doesn't mean that that would translate in within the rest of the process, whether it is the financial arrangements or the parenting and children arrangements. I said there were two positive things. I think the second one would be the fact that it gave the opportunity for couples to apply for divorce jointly. Obviously, if a couple decides for the divorce jointly, that means that there's been a conversation between them about divorce. Then as professionals, we need to take that opportunity to deal with, to help that couple to deal with any emotions that may be hanging and any practical aspects, because if they have started that communication, let's make use of that so that we can have a better and a more amicable, shorter and less costly process, thinking about what's best for the whole family. I obviously, since the no-fault divorce, I have worked with a few couples as a coach. And what I've seen is that it's important that before, even if you are working with a couple, before they issue that divorce application, and before they are having all their chats about the financial arrangements, if they take some steps before that to deal with the interim arrangements, to deal with the healing and the recovery from what is happening before, and then everything else just becomes easier. So when I'm working with couples, we start with the emotional stages and seeing what are the issues. We deal with those first, then we deal with the children aspects, and then we gather all the information we need in relation to the finances, and then I refer them to obtain an opinion from a lawyer. It could be a barrister or solicitor, whatever they choose, impartial. It's an impartial opinion, so that will help them to make their decisions.
Well, that's really interesting. It comes back to what Sally said about having a team of people almost
Correct.
around the process. I know, Sally, that one of the things you're really passionate about is actually looking after yourself in the course of this process.
Divorce really has a significant impact on people's mental health, on their ability to concentrate, their ability to focus. I mean, that's best exemplified by the data, which shows that in work, their productivity will go down by 40% when they're going through divorce. I think I'm right in saying that 25% of people will leave their job within a year of divorce. And that is because of the impact on their mental health. And that vulnerability is really important, that you have someone actually helping you to focus on getting you into your best possible state. If you've never looked after yourself before, then there is never a better time than now to start. And I'm not just talking about, self-care as in bubble baths or whatever. I'm talking about real intense self-care where you're acknowledging what these emotions are, what they're doing to you, where you are actually allowing yourself to process those emotions, where you are taking steps to make sure that you are eating as well as you can, that you're getting out in nature, that you are meeting up with friends, that you've got that support network in place. All of those things are absolutely key.
We're fast running out of time on the discussion today, but I just wanted in perhaps a few words for you guys to share some thoughts on how we can create greater awareness of this. Sally, you've talked about the fact that mediation wasn't commonplace all those years ago, and now it very much is. How do we encourage the profession to embrace this role? Julia?
Yeah, I think that the starting point has to be for family lawyers and other professionals involved in the process to understand the role of the divorce coach, because I think there is still some confusion. When I started in 2020, I recall interviewing 20 different women, and none of them had ever heard of divorce coaching. Whereas now I'm finding that aside from referrals from professionals, is also existing clients that are referring people they know or they work with to me because they have experienced it and they know what it is. And I think for professionals that are involved in the process, they will also see that they will receive less complaints because the client have less regrets, because they are more conscious about their decisions. They explore their options. They have a better understanding and awareness of why they are feeling what they are feeling, why they are reacting in that way. Very simple and common examples that we encounter is, for example, you may have a client who is fixated on retaining the family home, but it's very clear to that professional that that will not be possible. And then if that professional refers that client to the coach, the client and the coach can explore the reasons why it's so important for that person to keep the home and understand the implications of doing that, and then giving an opportunity for that client to consider alternative options.
Sally, what about yourself? What do you think about how we can get the community to better embrace this role?
I think we start by making sure, as divorce coaches, we're doing our very best to let people know how we work. And there's, there are some divorce coaches that give the divorce coaches a bad name, and we need to be really getting it out there that you are talking about professional certified divorce coaches. I think that we need to make sure that clients themselves know we exist. So as an example, I had an article published in Noon, which is Eleanor Mills, who used to be editor of the Sunday Times, commissioned me to write it. I've had a lot of women get in touch with me since I wrote that article. And I think podcasts like this opportunities to speak at law firms and at meetings like resolution and things like that. Just get out there and spread the word as much as we can. I had a lawyer recently who said to me, I spent ages with a client. They were so upset. I spent an hour with them. I didn't really feel that, it was good use of my time. The client wasn't able to make a decision. And they were, still upset when they left, but I'd done my best. And then they sent a complaint when they got my bill. And I think the reality is that lawyers are very, very expensive at doing what we do. And if we're trying to think about the best deal for clients, then I think, going back to what I said before, I think the team approach ultimately is a winner for everyone. The lawyer will have a coherent client who can make decisions. The client will have an understanding of their finances, and they'll be able to manage their emotions.
I think you've both provided a comprehensive assessment of what a divorce coach brings to the table as far as the divorce is concerned. And I think we've sort of had a quite honest conversation about the benefits to it, which, as far as I can see, are pretty plentiful. But then perhaps you guys are biased being coaches yourselves. It's been fabulous to have you both on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Sally.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Julia.
Thank you very much, David.
The Today's Family Lawyer podcast is available on your preferred podcast provider. It's also available on todaysfamilylawyer.co.uk. Thank you both to Sally and to Julia for their insight. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
You're listening to the Today's Family Lawyer podcast, the leading source of daily news and insight for family law practitioners in England and Wales. Sign up to our free weekly newsletter at todaysfamilylawyer.co.uk and subscribe to hear all the latest news and views from across the family law sector. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.